Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about a couple of developments regarding the Kashmir issue. Today the Prime Minister was in fact addressing the International Sikh Convention, and he did speak about the ongoing atrocities in Kashmir, and he also said that everyone should raise the voice for the Kashmiris, every Pakistani and everywhere, because it's not only about the disputed issue, it's about the humanitarian crisis out there. So when we talk about the curfew, it's been over now 4 weeks. Acute shortage of food, water, medicine, there's no hospital service, there is no internet connection, social media has been taken off. So is the case with other means of communication. In fact, this was also stated by Bernie Sanders, the Senator of the United States of America, and he also showed his concern about the total blackout in Kashmir. Let's see what Mr. Sahi has to say about it.
So, in Kashmir, where the Indian government has revoked Kashmiri autonomy, cracked down on dissent, and instituted a communications blackout. The crackdown in the name of security is also denying the Kashmiri people access to medical care. Even many respected doctors in India have acknowledged that the Indian government imposed restrictions on travel are threatening the life-saving care that patients need. India's action is unacceptable. The United States government must speak out boldly in support of international humanitarian law and in support of a UN-backed peaceful resolution that respects the will of the Kashmiri people.
Some very strong statements from none other than the US Senator Bernie Sanders, who said that this is not acceptable at all. He did talk about the communication blackout and also talked about the crackdown on the civilians, and then he also spoke about the lack of medical camps and whatever is going on in Kashmir at the moment. Since there's an absolute blackout, a lot of information is not coming out, but life is practically like living in hell out there. To talk about today's issue, we have with us in our studio, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Ikram Bhatti Sahab, who's a senior defense analyst. Thank you very much. And we have with us Imran Jan, who's a senior journalist, and will be shortly joined in by Dr. Professor Rifat Hussain Sahab, who's a senior strategic analyst. But to start off from you, sir, a very encouraging, I would say, very encouraging remarks from the US Senator. So your take. He has in fact highlighted the major problems about the communication blackout, the crackdown on the civilians, the shortage of medical camps, and the atrocities going on by the Indian forces in the Indian occupied Kashmir. So, and he says that the world must act now. Your take, sir.
Well, it's very encouraging for both Kashmiris and for Pakistanis that we have heard some very forceful words from none other than a US Senator. But we'll have to wait and see that he is a Democratic Senator and also a presidential candidate from the Democratic Party. How much can he influence his own party and of course influence the policy of the Republican government, because that is what matters at the moment. And if we can have more like him who speak similarly, and I guess that would bring about a rethought in the US current government, and hopefully they would come up to the expectations of the world, of the Kashmiri people, that they are right now the only one in the position of bringing about a resolution of this issue. Because United Nations, while they have the sole responsibility, the fact remains that America, being the sole superpower, can definitely influence. And we have seen in the history that the issue of East Timor was resolved within a year. that of South Sudan was accordingly resolved, and that was done through the offices of the United Nations. And if the Americans do want it to happen, actually, it can happen in that manner. So we can hope that there are more voices of the like of Senator Bernie Sanders, and he can influence and gather a momentum within the Congress, within the Senate.
But sir, you know, I totally agree with you on those two comments, sir, that the UN and in particular US can play a very major role. You gave two examples, one of Sudan. We have talking about the division of Sudan, sir. In one area there were Christians, on the other side there were more Muslims. So the case was with another Muslim country, that was Indonesia, where we saw East Timor again, the issue of Christians. So primarily, sir, what the UN or the Americans have done, they have not taken care of the Muslims issue. Actually, they've divided and given a separate homeland to the Christians. But it's the other way around here, sir, when you talk about Kashmir or Palestine for that matter. And these two countries, whether you talk about Israel regarding Palestinian issue or Indonesia regarding the East Timor issue, they were not that influential, sir. Don't you think that the world actually has double standards, sir?
Certainly, there is no denying that, but the fact remains that this is a human society, it's a civilized world, although might remains right. But the fact remains that we have this example in front of us. There are champions of democracy, human rights all over the world in different world institutions. And above all, I still have faith and confidence in the global public opinion, because I believe that public opinion is free from state interests. And if people like Senator Sanders can influence the public opinion within the US, within Europe or within the world, I'm sure all those people, all those opinions will influence the view that the other governments are having vis-a-vis the Kashmir issue. And while we know that East Timor and South Sudan were both issues where it was Muslim countries and primarily the interest of the Christians was taken care of, but the fact remains that it was an issue of similar nature. There was a requirement of a right of self-determination to be exercised, and the UN did oversee that and did execute it. And we have a similar situation where the world is out there to see that is the UN prepared to come up to the expectations once again and perform and deliver as it did earlier, or is it just going to be primarily on ethnic or religious basis, which is going to be very dangerous.
Absolutely,
for such an institution.
Oh yes. Now, Imran Sahab, I was watching this very interesting video of one Latin American woman who was actually imprisoned when she was 9 months pregnant in USA, and unfortunately she gave birth to a boy there in the prison, in that certain room. She was kept there, and she kept yelling and kept shouting and nobody came. And later on there's a lot of hue and cry in the American media, on the Facebook and otherwise, that the constitutional right you cannot take away even from a prisoner or somebody who's been even convicted for that matter. Over here, sir, you are talking about innocent Kashmiris. And obviously, if Sandy Berners says something, Senator means business, and he has actually shown the right picture of what is going on. He's been honest at least. But unfortunately, whatever we have been witnessing over the period of time is that the Kashmir issue has been sidelined. Whenever you talk to the High Commissioner ambassadors, even in Islamabad, they would also consider this as a bilateral issue. Forget about the international issue, but bilateral. But over here, India has said that this is our internal issue, but at the same time, whenever Mr. Modi speaks to other international leaders, he says, well, you know, it is a bilateral issue. So I fail to understand his own ideology. Is he double-minded? What exactly is brewing in his mind? I want you to comment on this particular point, I would say. Right after this break, we'll take a short break and then we'll return. Stay with us.
It's time for Isha prayers in Rawalpindi, Islamabad. People in other parts of the country may offer their prayers according to their local timings.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Welcome back after the break. Now, during the break, we've been joined in by Professor Dr. Sensa, who's a senior strategist. Thank you very much for taking your time out and being a part, sir. We were earlier having a discussion regarding the ongoing atrocities, obviously, committed by the Indian forces, but also very encouraging statements from none other than the Senator Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
So I want your comment also. But sir, before that, please let's talk about the previous questions, sir, which I have put for you.
So the issue of Kashmir has been propelled to the front, and the Indian people have to thank only Modi for that, because as you mentioned, this issue wasn't an issue that people even discussed. Even in Pakistan, it wasn't even the mainstream issue that people discussed on a day-to-day basis. And now this is like the fourth or fifth talk show that I'm in, we are only talking about this issue, and the global media at the same time is talking about that. Bernie Sanders, who is a US senator, at the same time, a very serious presidential candidate.
Oh, yes.
There's a good chance he can beat Donald Trump in the election. If
Imran
he-
Sahab, people used to say that if that man would have been
Had-
contested against Donald Trump,
And
he
it-
would have been president today.
I personally believe the same, but then Hillary Clinton got nominated. But what I want to say is that this is like, if not the first time, but the first time in a very long time that a Democratic senator is sounding not very pro-India stuff that people used to believe all the time. People always, I mean, when it comes to Israel, doesn't matter what party a senator belonged to, they were all pro-Israel. But when it came to India and Pakistan, generally the Republicans were believed to be pro-Pakistan and the Democrats were believed to be a little pro-India, not very much pro-Pakistan. That is a US senator from the Democratic Party, and he is saying the things that no other senator, until right now has mentioned. So that is quite serious. That is a tectonic shift in my view. And like I said, we have to thank Modi for that, for bringing that issue to the front. And everybody, like I said, is talking about it. So also, Prime Minister Imran Khan published an op-ed in the New York Times 2 or 3 days ago. What that does and what India is doing right now is actually creating this image of Pakistan as a rational, cool-headed, peace-loving state, which is not what we had before, which is not how people used to talk about Pakistan before, especially after the 2008 Mumbai attacks. But now it is India that is the aggressor, that is irrational, that keeps saying that we want to solve this issue bilaterally with Pakistan, but at the same time doesn't want to talk about it. So it is now India that people see as a country that doesn't want to talk about peace, that is irrational, that doesn't want to talk at all. And Pakistan is now the rational state. Globally, people are watching that the leader of Pakistan is sounding all the right sounds and is talking about peace. So that is a big shift. That itself, right there, is a victory for Pakistan on global stage.
So coming to you now, first of all, I would like to have your comments on these very historic words, I would say, of Bernie Sanders. Obviously, as earlier mentioned by Mr. Imran, that he could be the next presidential candidate, sir, from the Democratic Party. And you never know. If he is, there's a shift. Democrats might win and he could be the next US president. But sir, normally what we have witnessed in the past, even if I remember the Secretary of Defense and a couple of other individuals, they did speak about Kashmir earlier in certain universities. They did highlight the problem and so on and so forth, sir. But unfortunately, the moment they get some official position in any capacity, they always retrieve from their statements, sir. What about in this case, sir?
Well, let me give you a little bit of a background. When Robin Raphael was the Assistant Secretary of State, she had made, when somebody asked her a question, she was then the Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia, dealing with both India and Pakistan. A question was asked about the status of Kashmir dispute. She actually questioned the very legitimacy of the instrument of surrender. She said that the circumstances under which instrument of surrender was signed by the Kashmir Maharaja on 26th of October, she said that I am not sure whether those were the legitimate circumstances, and Maharaja felt coerced by the Indian state because the Indian troops were already present on the Srinagar airport. So that created such a ruckus, there was such a uproar by the Indian journalists who were based in Washington, and and for 3 years, Robin Raphael was declared persona non grata
By the Indians.
by the Indians. So that's a matter of historical record. Why do I recall this? Because that, and coupled with the 9/11 events and coupled with the Indian narrative, they were able to discredit the Kashmiris' struggle for their freedom, for their struggle for self-determination as a terrorist struggle. Now, fast forward to 2019, and and Asim Jan Sahab, Amit Jan Sahab, Imran Jan Sahab mentioned that we have to thank Modi and Pankaj Mishra, who writes for Bloomberg and many of the credible international publications. has published recently, about 3 or 4 days ago, an article in which he said the title was, "Has Modi shot himself in the foot?"
Foot, yes.
So, and a question mark. So, even the most rational, most seasoned commentators are questioning the wisdom of Modi has done in Kashmir, and resultantly we see in 2019 a shift in public mood, in global public opinion, and you have the statements coming out from Bernie Sanders, in which he has expressed his deep anguish over what's happening in Kashmir. And of course, the credit goes to Prime Minister Imran Khan for doing an op-ed. I do not recall any op-ed done by a Prime Minister of Pakistan for the last 2 decades. So it's for the first time that Prime Minister Imran Khan has penned an op-ed piece in which he has advocated, and he has torn off the veil which the Indian government is putting on his face, pretending to be a Democrat. He said they are not Democrats, they are fascist, they are totalitarian, they are authoritarian, and it is the job of Pakistanis as well as the Kashmiris to show the real face of India to the delusionals, to these people who believe that Modi stands for democracy. Democracy is a thing of the past, and now we have an authoritarian, militaristic, aggressive regime in power, and that's
Now, Doctor, the RSS agenda and this extremist mindset, I mean, that is pretty obvious. And the moment you see what's happening to minorities, forget about the Muslims, so many other minorities. I was reading a couple of stories, I mean, where there is forced conversion, and then there is another issue that they will not register the Muslims.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
whether they are from Myanmar or they are from Bangladesh or they are from India, that is going to be another issue.
You know what is
So
happening in
this
Assam?
is also a part of ethnic cleansing, sir. This is exactly what happened to those 1 million poor Muslims in the Rohingya, basically.
Yeah. So Prime Minister of Pakistan is warning the people that if you do not recognize the Modi government for what it is, then the world is going to face a tremendous situation, and that situation may lead India to attack Pakistan, and resultantly the risk of nuclear escalation and the war between the two countries. He is warning, repeatedly warning, putting the international community on notice that please pay heed to what is happening inside India in terms of Modi's extremist and Hindutva agenda.
Sir, I'll just give you one example, sir. Remember, sir, there was this plane which was shot down by the Indians almost a decade, maybe more ago, sir, in which there were a lot of officers and cadets, basically, sir. And it was shot down in the Indian Ocean, right, sir? And all of them got killed. And authentic sources tell us, and I'm sure you also know about it, sir, when the Indian submarine, the diesel submarine, which came inside the Pakistani territory right after this 27th issue, sir, there was some technical fault in it, and it could not go back. And it was like a duck for us. We could have shot it down, but we did not. At a very top level, they decided not to destroy it. Otherwise, it could have led to something which couldn't have been controlled later. But what I'm saying, sir, this is the initiative for peace at every level Pakistan is taking, starting from the top to the bottom, sir. But once the enemy is not listening, once they believe that that they have some other super design in their mind, sir, do you think this is the time? This is the time now, because later will be late. Earlier, I don't know for what reasons we haven't done it, as we say that we are always reactive rather than being proactive. But, sir, initiative for peace, don't you think, sir, the international world should also appreciate Pakistan and our efforts in trying to retain peace in the region, sir, whereas the hawks on the other side, they are making sure that something should happen, ready to trigger a war, sir.
Well, you see, both India and Pakistan are not in a position to continue or in a conventional war. They are militarily weak, we are financially weak. So we're going to climb up the escalation ladder very rapidly and very quickly. And the government of Pakistan is trying to impress upon the world to take a notice of this situation and watch out for the Indian instigations, Indian designs, Indian plans. While they may be trying to subdue Pakistan and trying to dissuade Pakistan from its efforts in drawing the attention of the world to the plight of the Kashmiris. But the fact remains that in their efforts, they are, or they are, it is feared that they may attempt a Pulwama type of incident, and under the garb of that, they may undertake some adventure or a misadventure against Pakistan. Last time, fortunately, they could not cause any damage of life and property in Pakistan. Hence, Pakistan came up with only a proportionate response, just to demonstrate its will.
They claimed they threw 5 bombs, actually 4 were thrown in the jungle, and we retaliated with 6 strikes.
Yes.
And I was told, sir, again, a very interesting story to share. I think the whole world should know, because now it's an open secret. We shot down 2, we locked 6 more. And they were like right there. We could have shot them down. The total number would have been 8. And that could have led to something else. So we locked, and even said those targets, I mean, I've seen the footages recently, that those targets were locked, but they did not fire on the targets.
True.
They fired on the side, and this was shown. And plus the MiG-21, which they claim that they have shot down from Abhinandan's MiG-21, they shot down one of F-16. It had 4 of its missiles. It had 4 hard points, and the 4 missiles
None
were
fired.
intact. Sir, none was fired, yes.
And of course, the pilot also had never made any claim in Pakistan or after even gone back to India. Anyway, you see, there is a very real fear and a very real danger of India repeating the same, just in order to divert the attention of the world, divert the attention of its own people towards whatever they're going to, they're doing in Kashmir. So that is why our effort is to make the world feel and realize and see that this is a very, very precarious situation. And if the powers that be do not intervene, they do not dissuade India from continuing with its policies in Kashmir, there is a very real danger that there could be a conflict which will very rapidly degenerate into a nuclear conflict, and which is going to affect not just 2 countries, not just the region, but the entire world. And that is why we now feel that there is a realization emerging in the world. The global media has started to take notice of it. They have started to write about it, and there are protests all over the world. And of course, the latest example is that of the US senator. So let's hope that sanity emerges, sanity prevails, and the
Sir,
world
expecting
opinion.
sanity from Narendra Modi.
Well, you see,
I mean, what is that supposed to mean?
well, you see, it's not just Narendra Modi, but there are people across the world, there are governments, there are institutions who should behave in a sane manner, take responsibility, intervene. I expect sanity from them, because they have to sense the situation.
All right.
And dissuade this person from going ahead with whatever he is doing in Kashmir. And at least for the moment, Pakistan has refused to, sit down on a negotiating table with the Indians until they stop their atrocities in Kashmir. They stop this curfew, and of course they review their decision of annexing Kashmir in the manner that they have done. So I think there is hope at the same time, because people have now started to realize, the governments have started to realize, and we can expect that they will be able to exercise some sort of a restraint on India and make them realize that they cannot continue in the manner that they're going ahead. And as long as that happens, there is this real danger, there is the real risk of any escalation.
We'll definitely, sir, talk about that risk also. That's very important. Another very important agenda, and we're talking about the European Parliament's committee, where they discussed the Kashmir issue. The Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi Sahab, also hailed them that this is something which we really need to appreciate. At least that issue has been taken up. Now, one of our very, I would say, refined bureaucrats, Saeed Janjua Sahab, he has been sent there in Belgium as an ambassador. A lot of expectations from him also. Now, the role of Brussels, we are talking about the role of European Union here, sir. plus or minus UK, that's a separate chapter. How important that would be, sir, when the French, I mean, obviously they had some business engagement with the Indians, so they did not support in one way or the other. Obviously, so many other countries. But don't you think the importance of European Union cannot be ruled out, sir?
Well, there is definitely some importance. I mean, it's not just only France in the European Union. There's England, there's Germany, there's many other important and influential.
28 members.
Yes, there are 28 members, and we cannot rule out that their role will not be significant. It absolutely will be. But at this, I mean, we know France is trying to sell their, Rafale and other such to India. But what I want to say is that we keep focusing, when it comes to India and the annexation of Kashmir, when it comes to the post-August 5 actions, we keep focusing on, I mean, if you read most of the articles that I read, for different newspapers, I personally advocate for showing strength to India because that is a language that they, I believe, understand. But then at the same time, like I said, a case could be made that maybe this is not the only strategy to achieve the reversal of that annexation. I mean, if you look at the previous Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, he just came out with a message. He said that the economy is weak and the GDP growth is only 5%. The manufacturing sector of India is only growing by 0.6%. Then you have Assam. Close to 2 million people have been rendered stateless because of the requirement to prove citizenship or to prove that they came on or before, after March 24, 1971, which was the eve of the war with Pakistan. I see very strong parallels between what is happening here in Kashmir, what India is doing, and I mean, it may be a stretch, but what Soviet Union did in Afghanistan in 1979, I see a lot of parallels between these two situations because it was the economy that broke Soviet Union down. They had a lot of weapons, they had a lot of arms, they could fight till the end. But what they didn't have was enough money. And India's economy...
Another reason, sir, they had USA backing the Afghan
Mujahideen.
Taliban and the Mujahideen
Yes.
at that time. So and plus the kind of weapons which were given to them to shoot down their helicopters and all.
Exactly.
So primarily
Stinger
they had a
weapons.
lot of strength.
Yes, but I mean, it was the economy that broke Soviet Union down. They were eventually forced to go back. What I'm wondering is Kashmir going to become India's Afghanistan? Is this going to be their graveyard? I'm not going to call them an empire because India is not as strong as the Soviet Union was or still is, and how strong the United States is. But like I said, I mean, war or showing strength by Pakistan could be one option to counter India. Another option would be, as we are seeing, Pakistan is building up brick by brick, step by step, this image of India as an aggressor state. But at the same time, what if, as we mentioned here, did Modi just shoot himself in the foot? Someone wondered about that. What if that is actually happening in Kashmir? Because they just increased their troop level from what was close to 700,000 Indian soldiers to now close to 1 million. And this is only a few weeks into the annexation. What if the soldier deployment increases, the military spending increases, and you have weaknesses in your country?
And at the same time, what if the demographics change? What if these RSS miscreants, I would say, if they are inducted there? Because there was this very interesting footage, sir, in which there were like hundreds of these swords which were being given by the police and the law enforcement agencies to these goons, sir, just to kill the Muslims there. So this is another, because they are doing whatever they can do, and blood and life doesn't matter to them, especially of the Muslims and the minorities.
And as much insanity as they can show will go against them. And exactly because there cannot be a war between Pakistan and India unless they both want to be completely destroyed, mutually assured destruction. Both are nuclear states. But if, like I said, the parallel between India and Soviet Union here is that and their economy is already doing bad. That's why if you look at the Indian media, there is no discussion about economy. It's all jingoism, it's all nationalism, patriotism, the saffron wearing scarves, scarves wearing people. It's all about nationalism in there. There is no discussion, and that's why the previous Prime Minister had to come up with a recorded message saying, our economy is showing very bad signs. And so if they're economically weak from within, and then you have 2 million people
Talking
rendered stateless.
about the economics now, Dr. Saab, moving on to you. Another story that there was this conference on Kashmir which was held, and people like Ambani's and all the movers and shakers, I would call them, of India in terms of economy, they have actually pledged about $40 billion for Kashmir. Imagine that kind of amount. We were talking about the CPEC, Chinese money. Over here, they're talking about investments, tourism, schools, colleges, transportation. This is what they have a plan in their mind. There was another story, I do not know whether how authentic that was, that the Israelis, Americans and the Indians really want to make Kashmir the top tourist hub. Along with that, all the top universities would be there now. So just imagine, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, giving jobs, investing money. So they have another agenda at the same time. So where do you see this moving, sir? Do you think they can dilute the effort by investing such sort of?
As my friend Jansa has mentioned, if you look at the annual growth statistics of the Indian economy, they had the worst year this year, 2019, for the last 20 years, where the growth rate has come down to less than 5%, and those figures are being published. Those are being debated in Pakistan, in India. What does that mean? That means that the Modi is the shining India image that Modi was able to cultivate, whereby they will be able to put a lot of money. This is a dream. These are the dream that the Hindutva dream that is being sold by the Modi government. And actually, if you look at the substance of it, there is no substance to it. How can Ambanis be so irrational that
So they were the supporters. These were the people who invested in him during the first term. I mean, these were the people
but
behind
how could he sink billions or billions of his empire into a territory which the Indian 90,000 or 1 million army is unable to control, unable to pacify? So they can think of buying land, which they will ultimately, but then there is going to be, the Kashmiris are not, if they refuse to be budged from the land which belongs to them and which they are unwilling to sell it to them. So it may seem very romantic that that the image that they are trying to cultivate is image of a strength, image of economy doing well, but in reality, and that's what matters the most, in reality, the reality is very, very ugly, and it's very, very different from what the Indians are claiming about their economic performances. We have mentioned, what's happening in Assam, what's happening in Nagaland, and 7 insurgencies, and the Sikhs and the Kashmiris. If all these movements come together, that could virtually be the end of India as a cooperative federation.
I just want
But just a minute, sir. Over here, this is an ideal way of thinking, sir. But people from Assam, Nagaland, they have issues in the south also. Honestly, I ended up meeting few people from the Tamil side, sir, in Maldives. And honestly speaking, they thought I was an Indian. And he asked me, "Are you from Delhi?" And jokingly, I said, "Yes." And then he started, because those people, poor people, have no clue what's going on in the north, in the rest, because India is huge. I'm sure same the cases in the eastern side of India. So the cases in the Punjab province, Khalistan.
If you go outside,
they're still not happy by breaking.
Faisal, if you go outside the Hindu belt, you will come across that there is no resonance amongst those people.
Most of the power of Hindus lies in the UP side and the middle of India primarily, sir. You wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add that I'm not sure we can look this up, but you mentioned that Ambani has pledged to invest $40 billion in Kashmir. I think his entire net worth is $40 billion.
No. His entire net worth is much over than 90, both the brothers. Now, one brother. But what I'm saying is,
maybe as a company,
this
aided by the country.
not only him. I'm saying he and his
conglomerates of rich.
That's because there was a lot of people were there, a lot of foreigners were there. I think this was held in Dubai, if I'm not wrong.
Right.
So Sheikh Rashid Saab says that we have got tactical nuclear weapons which are capable of causing targeted damage in India. tactical weapon is still a small nuclear weapon, sir. It doesn't mean that you're not nuking them. You're nuking them at a smaller scale. Obviously, when we talk about the war which can lead to that extent, sir, the war is a war. At the end of the day, there are no rules, as they say, in love and war. So exactly. Now, sir, when Pakistan is a smaller country, when you talk about the military, smaller in size, we always had a defensive force. So the cases with the Air Force and Navy. But, sir, Indians are just ready for a misadventure, most likely, over here, sir. Prime Minister has also spoken about the false flag operation and all. And you also mentioned about that. Now, sir, quick comment from all three of you in the same point, sir. Probability of a war, sir, and can it actually get to that level where Pakistan not willingly is persuaded, is pushed to that extent that where we have to push a button, sir?
You see, the initiative is with India, and we will only be responding. And last time, both India and Pakistan were fortunate that no damage of or loss of life or property was caused. Hence, it died right there and did not escalate. We returned Abhinandan, and that was the end of it. However, if India is embarking upon another adventure where they want to camouflage their atrocities and declare them as directed against intruders from Pakistan only and not against Kashmiris, and to justify such a adventure, they create an Pulwama 2 sort of a incident, and if that happens and they carry out another surgical strike, which does inflict some damage of life and property, then of course the proportionate response of Pakistan may evoke a bigger retaliation, and that would mean war. And as I said, if that happens, it is going to escalate very rapidly. And then I guess nobody knows
where it can lead.
And how will it end.
Interestingly, sir, since you spoke about Pulwama, another very interesting article that all those who died, I'm talking about the Indian soldiers in this Pulwama attack, sir, they were all from the lower caste. We don't believe in caste as Muslims, but sir, in India, when you're talking about that, 90% of those killed in that attack were Dalits serving in their forces. So a lot of people say that few of them were not well also, they were being sent back to their barracks and all, and that the explosion took place. So inside job, you can't rule that out, sir. Please, go ahead, sir. 1 minute for each of you, sir, please.
So the question about is it going to go to a war? In my view,
probability.
The probability, I mean, I cannot really say what is the percentage of that, but what I believe is a full-scale war is not going to happen between Pakistan and India, for the very reason that even if a small skirmishes start, first of all, the United States Embassy, not too far from where we are sitting in New Delhi, will be very busy shuttling back and forth between the Prime Minister's offices and their embassies. They'll be the ones, the first ones to respond and try to stop a war and, whatever situation they might come up with, the solution they might come up with. And for the same reason, both countries know if the war escalates to a full-scale war, they will both be completely, or maybe to a very large extent, destroyed, because both have nuclear weapons. And India saw...
Primarily, it's not about the region. Now it is going to be a global issue. Sir, closing remarks from you, Dr. Saab.
Well, in my reckoning, war is not imminent, but the possibility of war cannot be ruled out.
Correct.
Because we are dealing with a madman, we are dealing with Modi, and anything rational from him cannot be expected. He is capable of using war as a diversionary tactic to dilute the focus on Kashmir, and also to create some sort of a diversionary tactic whereby he would feel elated that he has pushed his finger on the war button. But I do not think that war ultimately a full-scale war, which will have nuclear overtones, is in either country's interest. And if you look at all the
What about a misadventure in Azad Kashmir, sir? For example, if they plan to do something over there, what options do we have, sir?
No, but then comes Pakistan's proportionate response. India does one thing, Pakistan does B. India does C, Pakistan does D. But how rapidly are we sure that we are controlling the events? So either side can lose control over the events, and that is where the lesson of the modern historical wars is that most of the wars have occurred because of misadventure and miscalculation.
Definitely, sir. But anyway, Dr. Saab, thank you very much. Imran, it was a pleasure to have you, sir. APM Saab, it's always good to see you, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Allah Hafiz. अब डॉक्टर साहब कल रात से